Hello, and thank you for joining us today for our webinar with Locology, Modern Commerce Monitor Report Wave V-2, the State of Small Business Mid-COVID. My name is Lizzie, and I'm a Senior Account Manager for Locology, and I will be your host for today's event. A few housekeeping items before we begin. If you have any questions during the broadcast, please enter them using the question window in your control panel. If the time constraints prevent them from being answered during the webinar, we will respond to you via email. Our speakers today include Charles Laughlin and Neil Polachek. Both are senior analysts for Locology. Without further ado, I will pass it over to Charles and Neil to get things started.
Thank you, Lizzie, and thank you all for joining us today. I'm Charles Laughlin. As Lizzie said, I'm senior analyst with Locology, and I'm joined by my colleague, Neil Polachek. Neil?
Hey, good morning, Charlie.
Today?
I'm good, thank you.
Great. Neil's on the West Coast. I'm in the Central Time Zone, so hence it's morning for Neil and for many of you as well, I'm sure. So we're excited about our program today. We're going to sort of walk you through the Modern Commerce Monitor Wave 5-2, which follows up on a wave that we conducted in February. So before we get into everything, I'm just going to give you a little background on Modern Commerce Monitor, a little taste of what our methodology is. If you want more detail, of course, you can come to us later for that, but just to give you a sense of what MCM is, it's a members-only tracking study that measures small business SaaS adoption. And as you can see, we're in Wave 5. We began this back in, I think, 2017, if I'm not mistaken. So we've been doing this, and we will continue to do this for twice a year, just to get a sense of how small businesses are leveraging SaaS products and services and so on. So as I said, we just completed Wave V2 or 5-2 in April, which we ran basically to capture what's been going on. You know, you need to say more. So we did that, and then we're going to be updating it at least a couple more times this year. We survey about 1,100 respondents in each wave. So just a quick take on methodology. Again, it's 100% online. The cutoff for SMB is 500 employees. We focus on what is basically the elements of the business operation, everything from HR through operations, finance, supply chain, marketing, and so on. It's all weighted to US Census, business size and region, and so on. And what we're going to show you today is aggregate level data. We have the ability to cut this by a number of factors: vertical, business size, age of business owner, any number of ways. If you want to learn more about how we can do that, you can reach out to us later. We certainly have the ability to do that, but for the purpose of this event, we're going to present aggregate data. Okay, so before we get into the numbers, we thought we'd just kind of walk you through what we think is going on right now and sort of the changes in the marketplace that kind of led us to want to do the survey, do another sort of mini wave of the survey to capture the moment, get a sense of where small businesses are now, what they're feeling, what they're thinking. As everyone knows, stay-at-home orders are blanketed across the country. Some of them are beginning to ease, but in general, the country is more or less still under lockdown right now. These restrictions have created incredibly tough operating conditions for small business. But what I would add to that is that this creating new paradigms, new ways of doing business, and so on, which are creating a tremendous number of opportunities, I think, for people on this call, as well as in some sense for small business. Sort of how we're seeing it is that small businesses now have a lot of incentive to improve their tech stack with all the changes that are going on in terms of having to operate on a lean crew, having in some cases to move to e-commerce, having to move workers remotely. That's creating a lot of incentive for them to reevaluate their tech stack, which of course, this also provides a lot of opportunity for those in the audience, those who provide solutions to small business, to seize those opportunities. We're going to talk about that a little bit more throughout the event. But first, let's get into the numbers. Neil, why don't you talk about the challenging times we're seeing right now?
Sure. Thanks, Charles. Yeah, it's challenging times. There's no question about it. There's a ton of uncertainty out there. I don't think it would come to anyone's surprise that 75% of the respondents in this small business survey said that they had to either close their business or reduce capacity, either state restrictions or the supply chain issues, as we identified, 54% of them said they had some supply chain issues. I think maybe the bigger news is, and the bigger implication and long-term effect on the marketplace will be the two other data points here. The shift to some remote work, where 77% said they had to offer or chose to offer or were mandated to offer their employees to be able to do remote work or work from home. And importantly, and not surprisingly, 62% of those respondents felt that they were unprepared for that shift to work from home or remote work. And, you know, having been part of surveys for a long time, writing questions, looking at data for really a couple, I'd hate to say it, a couple decades, but maybe that much by now. We know, what I know about that 62 number is that I don't know, but I would believe that's probably even higher who felt they were unprepared. But, you know, a business person isn't going to say, oh yeah, I was totally unprepared. I think 62 is a pretty big number, and I would bet it's even higher, and some were ashamed to say they were totally unprepared. So not surprising to see this data. I would say, you know, while these are certainly challenging times, a lot of businesses are pivoting and figuring stuff out. I think of one business. I live here in the Bay Area, in a suburbia kind of area, and the sushi restaurant. Yeah, okay, it's upscale. I get that, but you can't get a to-go order from them anymore. They're like book solid. You call at 5 o'clock, unless you call literally start dialing at 4:59 and 50 seconds, unless you get in there in the first 5 minutes, they have no more capacity. So, you know, businesses are learning how to deal with this situation. I'm curious to ask the guy who runs it, because I know him enough to wonder whether this is a more profitable business than what he had going on before. So there's challenging times for sure, but lots of changes going on. You want to go to the next slide, Charles?
Yeah.
So as these businesses have to prepare for or deal with remote employees, I think we see a lot of areas where they're having to put technology at the forefront. And it shouldn't be surprising. You send someone home who's perhaps doing your front desk work and dealing with customers, and you send them home to work and they have no computer at home. So you got to get them a computer, and then you got to get them software. And then, you know, you got to make sure that there's security and that they have remote access, and whose internet are they going to use and who's going to pay for the internet. All sorts of implications for a small business who never in the past had really thought about sending their employees home and working from home. Lots of implications in terms of technology and how to set that up. You know, Charles and myself, I've worked at home for, you know, a long time. So I have the computer, and I have the bandwidth, and I have the microphone, and I have, you know, a lot of stuff. But for a lot of small businesses, this is a whole new world. So to only think that 62% were unprepared, I think is optimistic. I think a lot more were unprepared. I think the big takeaway on this slide, of course, is that 67% think that at least 10% of their employees will continue to work home post-crisis. Now, we don't know what post-crisis means, but what, you know, or when that is, but it's imaginable that the front desk person, a receptionist, somebody doing customer service, customer support, those are all business activities that could easily be handled from home, may reduce a small business owner's lease and real estate obligation, which will reduce their costs as, you know, their revenues are slowly going to build back up. And I'd stay with that for a long time. I think, you know, we're going to see a, you know, fairly fundamental shift in how businesses think about it, not without a bunch of anxiety on the part of small businesses either. Because in some other data in the research that I think is in the, we're not sharing this morning, but as a, you know, there are a bunch of small businesses owners who are concerned about, are there people that they send home to do remote work going to work, or are they going to be at the beach, in quotes? So I think there's a lot to be learned there. I'd also say that if you do the simple math on this data here, I came to a number that there may be as many as 4 million work from home small business employees going forward. Now that is a ton. That is a ton. And I think the implication is not just around technology, but it's also around, hiring implications. Are you going to hire back the people you had? Are you going to hire new people? You're going to have a different hiring approach. And then training. How are you going to train people to work from home? So there's a whole lot of stuff that's going on and going to go forward. Next slide.
All right. Yeah. So we're going to talk a little bit about the sentiment we're seeing out there. How business owners are feeling about the situation right now and what their sense of what's going to happen in the coming months. And I think I'll make a couple observations from this slide. One is that, if you look at that 43% number, that's a very large number that are concerned about business sustainability, understandably so, given so many have had to either shut down or operate on very limited basis. So it's natural that they would have that, fear about the sustainability of their business in the future. But otherwise, I think there's more than a hint of optimism in this data as well. A 9-month recovery timeline is arguably optimistic given the intensity of the disruption in the economy we've seen. Increase their operating budgets over the next 3 months. That suggests, we see a light at the end of the tunnel. The big one here, I think, is will they increase their marketing budgets? They will increase their marketing budget in the next 3 to 6 months. So what we're seeing now is essentially businesses in terms of new customer acquisition are more or less in hibernation. They just don't, for the most part, the sushi restaurant aside, don't see much point in going out and chasing new customers now. It's keep your current customers happy, sort of stabilize the business, figure out what you need to do to sustain yourself over the next few months. But they see in that 3 to 6 month window that they're going to start spending on marketing again. And I think that's an important metric to keep your eye. If you're in the business of helping small businesses do marketing and acquire customers, you should keep an eye on that timeline. So I think yeah.
Before we move off this slide, I was looking at some data that Thrive shared with me. They've been doing a tracking study. And what was clear in their data is that as businesses were starting to get the loans, the PPE stuff,
right,
they were extending the time frame that they saw as being able to survive. So I think, I know there's lots of talk about, did that money go to the right people and how easy was it to get? And I think this apparently the second round of funding, which was I think 320 billion or something like that, apparently that's gone very well. The average size of those distributions are like the $70,000 range, I think, which means real small businesses are getting a lifeline. And this is not a political discussion today, but I do think there's probably more that's got to come that way and maybe lengthen the time frame. But I think it's good news that the businesses that are, looking at a challenging time are getting some bailout resources, and it's flowing down to the small businesses that you and I spend, our lives sort of trying to understand and analyzing. So that was good news that I heard the other day.
Yeah, no, that's an important thing to note. So talk about the evolving needs that we're seeing.
Well, sure. As you send people home and you think about working from home and having remote workers, we just see, really significant opportunity and need in fulfilling some of this work at home, remote worker software stuff. And these are all software opportunities for people who offer this stuff out. We've been talking a lot about messaging and chat software for a long time. As you think about how you have to engage the modern consumer from a customer experience perspective, that's must have. stuff. So I think it's, look, I think business owners, when we had a red hot economy, and so when you have a red hot economy and these business owners have no time really to put any, new technology into their business, they were running, really fast and servicing all they could and, making really good money. We've had this pause, and I think this pause is really a time for these business owners to think about, if there's another pause, what are the tools and software solutions they need to have in place to manage through that? And now I think, the whole notion of remote work and work at home is going to go on for some time. And maybe it will be a permanent shift. And so as business owners think about that, they need to invest in these kinds of software applications.
Well, as I think the previous slide noted, it's roughly 10% think that they're going to have some level of remote work. So it will be permanent, if not predominant. So here, this slide here, Neil, kind of references, we mentioned that 70% number a minute ago of, 3 to 6 months they'll start pouring money into customer acquisition. What we're seeing here is that for now, the money is going into sort of operational types of solutions.
And I think that makes a lot of sense, because as businesses have had to go to contactless stuff, to certainly contactless payments, they've had to, invest in, the payment solutions that are easier to use, easy to access. So it's no surprise that that number jumps so high in finance and operations. I suspect as we move forward, we'll see the marketing thing tick up as well. I think it's interesting as well that payroll and HR, online solutions for that had to tick up too, because if the business owner is now working remote or from home and they're still keeping some people on their payroll, they need some easier solution, online service to execute on that stuff. So not much is surprising here. And I think it's certainly on the finance and operations piece, it's a really good thing to see that uptick, because that means that businesses are applying the technology that's been out there for a long time, frankly, but they've had the time to step back, consider different software solutions, and start to put them into place. So, good news there.
Yeah, so we're going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing actually out in the marketplace as companies that are Locology members or in the sort of ecosystem that Locology operates in, how they're responding to the moment, and sort of what we're seeing a lot of is sort of fast tracking of solutions that are perhaps in the pipeline or in the product roadmap, and bringing them forward to sort of meet the moment, meet the demand signals that are coming out of this moment. And we're going to just share a few examples of these. One is Facebook. Actually, a couple of things about Facebook that Facebook has done. One is noted here, Messenger Rooms, which essentially it's just adding a video meeting function within Facebook Messenger, so that I forgot the upper limit of but it's maybe it's 100. Sorry if I don't know, but you can have a large group meeting, and it doesn't require Facebook having a Facebook account and all that. So it's very, very much in line with what other online meeting solutions offer. They rolled that out very quickly. Another example is something they recently launched called Business Nearby, which is a solution that sort of highlights recent posts from businesses within a certain geographic area, which you can sort of set. I think the default is 5 miles, but you can set it up to, I think maybe it's up to 500 miles. And so, they're sort of rolling out these tools. They've done some enhancements to their business inbox and Messenger. So really a lot of things that are helping small businesses, connect with their customers more easily. Soci, basically they're a SaaS platform for digital marketing, mainly working with multi-location businesses, came out with something called SmartBot, which is it's an AI-powered chatbot for Facebook Messenger which they can be pushed out to multiple locations. This again was probably on the roadmap for a little bit further down. It was moved up and rolled out because now businesses are operating on lean crews. Customers are, online all the time, have a lot more questions perhaps. The need to sort of communicate 24/7 is higher, and the resources to do that communication is often lower. So this is kind of a solution that met the moment. That's just one example. There's many others. We're going to share a couple more.
Hey, Charlie, on that chat thing, I
Yeah.
think, last year, I was talking to businesses all around the country, and
Right.
really encouraging them to start looking at chat, either live or bot-driven chat, because
Right.
I don't think consumers had then, and certainly won't have now, the patience to sit and wait for, drop a voicemail in somewhere and wait for that return message. So I think chat is going to be continue to be a very big opportunity for small businesses to serve their customers better.
Yeah, I mean, one, I know you're a big fan of voicemail, as am I.
Not a big fan.
Yeah, I know. But there's an important point here, which I think is a little sort of macro point that goes through all of this. And I think we've referenced it a bit before, which is the notion that things that we were talking about before this, like what you just said, like the need to have this 24/7 ability to answer questions, and not using voicemail and phone trees, but something that's more consumer friendly, meeting consumers where they are, which is much more text and messenger, much less phone and voicemail. And the notion that this crisis has accelerated the adoption and the importance of these types of solutions. So I think that's a good example. So
Yep.
moving on to iHeart, what they're doing is they've done a couple of things as well that are notable. One is sort of more in the community service vein, which is this a crisis resource. Basically, it's a resource for small businesses to go if they want to know about, where do they can get loans and, information to help them sort of stay afloat, particularly in the early days of the crisis. And they've also launched something called the Smart Audio COVID Recovery Program, which is basically a marketing package to help small businesses re-engage with their customers once the lockdowns are lifted, which is beginning to happen depending where you are in the country. So that's an example of basically a marketing support, and then it's sort of more of a community service type support. Now, Ford is doing some interesting things. What they're basically doing is they're freeing up co-op dollars for dealers to use those resources to buy PPE so that their reps and their service techs and all can interact with customers or help customers in a socially distanced and a safe way. For example, doing drop-offs of cars to be serviced and things like that. Ford is also helping dealers pay for the cost of remote pickup and delivery to sort of continue that service, in a way that's consistent with social distancing. And they're also been loosening rules on co-op funds, which tend to have restrictions on, which media types you can use under which circumstance. Basically, kind of reduce the regulation and left to the dealers much more discretion to use the media funds as they see necessary. And then one more example that we want to share with you, it's Herdat, which is a local digital agency, as fast-tracked. They had a local SEO program, which basically helps small businesses update their content to make it more relevant, help them compete more effectively with big brands in search. And this was a Q4 target that they brought up and released quite recently. So again, one example, and there's many others. Actually, if you go to our blog, we're writing about these all the time, where companies are, again, coming up with things to meet the moment, or taking things that were in the pipeline and accelerating their launch. We've really been pretty impressed with how quickly some of these pivots have taken place. So Neil, there's no going back.
No,
So what are we talking about here?
Well, what's the other side of this look like? I don't think any of us can sit here and predict what it's going to look like. But what we do know is that from the data is that I think these SMBs are now officially mobile first. We talked about it for a long time. We expected it for a long time. But if you look at the data there, 82% increase, wave 5 to wave 5.2. And in why they shift to a SaaS service, they want a smartphone app access to it. They want mobile access. They're running their business from their pocket. I've been imagining this would happen for a long time. I can often get out in front of my skis or over my ski tips sometimes and think things are going to happen sooner. Clearly, this is a fundamental change in how SMBs now think about the intersection of technology, how to run their business, and the phone that's in their pocket. Not only do they want to be able to access stuff from their phone, they want to be able to do stuff that's simpler. That's another big increase. I think that was a 75% increase between. They want it simpler to use. That was a big reason, a big driver of adopting this stuff. And then thirdly, they want them to be more secure. So that's not surprising that they want to be able to access it from their pocket, so to speak. They want it to be easy to use. And so if you're building product, you got to be thinking about how to make it simpler and easier to use, or even easier to use. And it's got to be secure. They feel a sense of security because now they're not just checking their text and email, they're checking their bank account stuff. They're checking their finances. They're checking their payroll stuff. So they want to make sure that those interactions are secure interactions. So I think that's a big deal. And, I think we're seeing a very significant shift in how the sort of going forward, these businesses are going to run their businesses.
Now, yeah, we can't predict the future exactly, but one thing I would imagine the save time, more efficient probably creeps back up over time as we come out of the recovery, because businesses get busier again, and that becomes their top of mind thing. I wish I had more time to get more things done. That said, I think in general, when behavior changes, it doesn't change back. So,
there's no doubt some will fall back, but if
some will, but I'm talking about like running it through your phone. That becomes a permanent, I think, practice.
I think so too.
Yeah. So a lot of things we thought were going to gradually, sometimes the old argument is it always happens slower in the short term, faster in the long term than you expect, right? And this is one of those moments, one of those events that just makes that all happen much faster. So this change that we thought was going to take a few years is now going to take a few months in terms of like this running your business through the phone behavior.
It's a big deal. So if we look at the next slide, we also see how they're purchasing this stuff. And that's a big shift. That's a big shift at the top there, that these business owners have some more time on their hands, okay? They're working from home. Maybe their business is at 25% capacity. Maybe they're shut down completely temporarily. So they're having time on their hands to go around and look out there for solutions. And they're probably reading a bunch of content. So if you're a SaaS provider, I think content right now is even more critical. People are looking for answers. They're looking for smart answers. They're looking for help. And if you can provide that and then direct them to your site and you have a solution that fits their need, they're going to buy it directly from that website. I think that's a really significant thing to think about. There's probably more freemium going on in there. Oh, sorry about that noise. Sorry, I don't know how to turn it off. I'm not good.
You must have a meeting coming up.
So I think the SaaS players out there are having to rethink their sales models and make it easier and easier for people to buy from them on their website, and then invest that money in onboarding and customer success. I think that's where the real opportunity in all this SaaS stuff is. I think, shoving product out there and hoping these small businesses will buy, I think people can back away from that. I think you got to give them answers and how these software solutions solve real problems. They'll come find you now, and then you've got to be able to bring them on. Maybe it's a freemium model, and then move them up the value curve as you deliver more value to them, and then start charging. So it's a real sea change, I think, going on out there.
So Neil, I know you talked to we both talked to a lot of companies that have direct sales organizations selling to small business.
Yeah.
Many of them have cut their teams way back to sort of, right size for the moment. What do you think happens when the smoke clears and things start to pick up? Do you think the
I
org
don't,
changes?
no, I don't think we're going to see, let's put another 100 new salespeople on. I think it might creep back up. I don't think it'll ever be where it was. Ever is probably a bad term. I doubt it'll be where it was. I think some of those models were ineffective. I think CAC was out of control, customer acquisition costs. And I think this period is forcing the VCs, the business owners, the business leaders of these SaaS companies to rethink how they go to market and how they build a sustainable business, not how they chase, the 50% quarter over quarter growth rates, but how do they deliver real value, keep these businesses on, keep delivering value to them, and then add incrementally solutions that, take you from X% of wallet share to X plus Y% of wallet share. And I don't think it's just throwing more people on sales calls. So,
Yeah, I mean, I think this is another example of accelerating a trend that was already there. And I think you're right, the sales organizations will be leaner, be much more after initial sale, after initial customer acquisition, less about initial customer acquisition, more product led, et cetera.
Totally.
Sales doesn't go away, its role changes. And I think this makes that happen faster. It was already happening. Again, another example of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then finally, look, privacy and all this stuff is going to creep into the brains of these small business owners. I think that the notion of work from home, they're increasingly concerned about this notion of privacy among remote workers. If certainly the medical dental space has always had HIPAA to consider, which is the privacy issues there. But I think, these small businesses really hadn't thought a lot about security and privacy. I think it's now going to become much more of a concern that they're going to have to address going forward. So,
well, I think you mentioned the need for content a couple slides ago. Maybe this, I think this is one area where SaaS companies should be communicating. It's like here's how our solutions help your security.
And I think my rant about transparency and all that stuff, Charlie. Yeah. I think if SaaS companies aren't transparent about how they're doing privacy, if small businesses aren't transparent with their customers how they're doing privacy, people will just walk away from those companies. I don't think there's the tolerance anymore to sort of wonder what's going on with my user information. I think people are raising, the awareness is being raised considerably.
Right. Okay, so again, what we're seeing, some interest, again, there's some, I think again, it's a difficult moment, but there's some silver linings in what's going on, as we've sort of been noting, in terms of accelerating positive trends. And what we're seeing, we asked sort of, how is your business, the way you operate your business, the way you do business changing? And how do you think this will change it in the future? Sort of, what have you learned from this, and what are you going to apply going forward, post-crisis, whenever that moment occurs? We hope soon. And these are all sort of things that we think businesses should be doing anyway, right? Communicating, collaboration, communicating with customers differently. I think that means a number of ways, maybe being more attentive with customers and also using different technology to communicate with customers. A greater willingness to adapt new technology, that's a big one. More online sales, to what we were saying a minute ago. Though I think they're talking about SMBs here, but SMBs that never thought about e-commerce are suddenly forced to try e-commerce, and now they're maybe seeing a greater addressable market going forward from e-commerce. Changing store layouts, that's probably related to social distancing. Only 4% said nothing will change. I think that's
4%. Those same 4 people who have their head in the sand.
I'm glad you said sand. Yeah, So, but yeah, but I think in a way the best number here is that only 4% say nothing will change, because
Yeah.
clearly, if anyone thinks nothing will change as a result of this, I think they really haven't been paying attention. So, anyway,
I
so I think this is,
think
a
that
positive set of.
Charlie,
Hmm?
I think the top one is really interesting because I think these
Yeah.
business owners are going to have to think about how they train their people, train their employees to do things differently. Whether it's an employee who goes to a customer's house or location, or how that employee deals with customers who come in. I mean, there's going to be a whole lot of stuff. And, back to the privacy thing, somebody sent me a text while we were on this call saying that in the state of Washington, restaurants are going to be required to maintain a list of customers who visit their restaurants, provide personal information. I mean, like, it's enough of a barrier to wonder, should I go to the restaurant? Now I'm going to give them personal information. So how is that business going to communicate that I'm collecting this? It's not going to get, hacked or, tampered
Right.
with. There are all sorts of wrinkles on that I think business owners are going to need a lot of help trying to navigate. A lot of help.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of, you raised another privacy issue that this is all going to bring. There's going to be a lot of those types of privacy issues where data is going to have to be collected for public health reasons, and people are going to have to figure out how they're going to explain how that data is going to be used and
And
what they're going to do to
Charlie,
protect it.
well, one other thing is that, I would like to take a poll of these business owners who wished that they had done a better job of
Hmm.
collecting name, current email address,
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Kept a
mobile
clean
phone
list.
of their
Yeah,
existing customers. The
yeah.
number of business owners who were lazy about that, nothing, I mean, not lazy, but just didn't have time to do it. There are probably millions who are wishing they had that because now they really need to communicate. And
Right, right, right. A high bounce rate when you're trying to communicate that
yeah,
about the survival of your business is not a welcome
well,
thing.
I use my friend Dan, the dentist, as an example a lot of times, and I helped him write an email to his patients, right? He sent it to me and I changed it a little bit. And oddly enough, I never received it because I'm still in his database at probably at my Yahoo mail, right? I've been a patient for 25 years with him. So I think we'll see business owners do a much better job of collecting that information, which will serve them really well going down the road.
Well, I think it'll be a lot more texting too. I
Yeah.
think there'll be a lot more. Okay, so let's wrap up with some final thoughts. Now, I think it's clear that everything we've shown you up to this point makes it pretty clear that by and large, small business owners are responding with changes that as we've been saying all along, changes that were kind of moving along slowly. The greater use of technology to communicate and to operationalize or to run things that had been pen and paper now are going into apps, and more e-commerce, more online payments. All these things that we were expecting to happen over time had to happen overnight, and this is going to move forward change in the small business market by a large factor, number of years. And also, I think it impacts which businesses come through this and which businesses struggle to come through this based on, one, their tech platform, configuration before the crisis, and then how quickly and how willing they were to adapt once the crisis hit. As we noted earlier, new customer acquisition is on the back burner for now, these businesses, and in terms of getting new customers, many in hibernation right now. That said, they signaled to us a fairly optimistic timeline for when they're going to come back, raise their heads up and say, okay, I think it's time to start bringing some new customers in. That was 3 to 6 months. I think that's a time window that everybody listening and consuming this data needs to write into their calendars, I think. And actually, what are you going to do now to prepare for that? And small businesses have been asking for a number of things from solutions providers to the companies building the SaaS tools, and we kind of showed you some examples of how the industry is responding, sort of in the midpoint of this presentation. But what they're asking for are pretty basic things. Help us through this. New tools, advice, content to help us through it, and then economic relief. Give them deferred terms. Give them a more freemium, more free trials, that sort of thing. Flexible payment terms. Whatever you can do, and I think many companies have been doing this, whatever you can do to help them just get through this, I think that comes back to you in terms of loyalty and customer lifetime. So I think, what goes around comes around, I guess, in times like these. So anyway, Neil, any final thoughts?
I just, I think that this is a challenging time, no question about it. There's lots of doom and gloom about the number of small businesses that are going to exit the marketplace. There were going to be a lot of small businesses that were going to exit the marketplace or should have exited the marketplace.
Right.
That's not to say
it's a high churn thing to begin with, right? It's
exactly.
tough to be a small business in the best of times, right?
And it's not to, and at the same time, if you look at the number of downsizing and force reductions, that's going to actually create more small business opportunity. More people think, oh, I got a great idea, I'm going to do this as a small business. So we may see a bunch of small business that have to shut down, that were maybe Luddites is kind of a not a nice term, but they weren't really.
It's a little judgmental.
Yeah, but they weren't using technology. They were happy in their old model. This sort of put them under. So we may see a whole new cohort of new small businesses that are going to leverage technology to the extreme and really be, a modern commerce business for the modern consumer. So,
all right. That's a good note to end on.
Cautiously optimistic.
Great. Okay. Thanks everyone for joining us. Lizzie, you want to take us out?
Sure. Well, I just want to first thank you, Charles and Neil, for this great briefing on the Modern Commerce Monitor Wave 5-2. A few more items from Locology before we end today's webinar. If you're interested in a customized analyst briefing for yourself or your team, please reach out to us at talk@locology.com, and we'll be happy to coordinate that. You will be able to view today's broadcast along with previous webinars on our website, locology.com. Just navigate to Research and Resources, and under that, Webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please be sure to visit locology.com or follow us on LinkedIn for future webinars and reports. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, Lizzie. Thanks, Charles.
Thank you. Take care.
Bye-bye.